All right, everybody. So much art history to cover and never enough time to cover it all. So let's go run through the art museum. We are still in chapter 24. And so this is part two. So we're going to look at Italian Baroque painting. I want you to know the term tenebrism. Do you remember chiaroscuro? It's the shading from light to dark. All right. Well, the actual official definition of tenebrism is chiaroscuro on steroids. All right. That's a joke. It's not the actual official definition. But if you look at this painting, where are all the values in this painting? If you're looking at the value chart to the side, like, do you see that there's only lights and darks? There's not very many in betweens. Like the highlights are super bright and the darks are super dark. All right, and we see it a lot here. You remember I taught you guys about this, that the Baroque artists got very good about lighting, making this dramatic lighting, where the Renaissance artists, frankly, sucked about making things have that dramatic lighting. It's just lit from all over, like they're in a room with fluorescent lighting or they're on a cloudy day. All right, so that sets kind of the scene for this guy right here, Caravaggio. He is the Baroque bad boy. And he's one of my favorite artists. And it's not just his art his art is amazing, but what makes him so much fun to talk about is his lifestyle, which I will talk about very soon. He is a master of tenebrism. Master of tenebrism and excessively realistic. Do you remember the basket of fruit painting that I showed you that had the wormholes and the apples and the dead leaves and stuff? That was this guy. He painted that. All right, are we done writing this stuff down? All right. So, in an era where that's a typo, where street fighting and drinking was normal, Caravaggio took it to the whole nother level. If there was a fight in the city, chances are that Caravaggio was involved. And in between paintings, he would fight. No, that's not how it happened. It was in between fights, he would paint. All right, so he was always scrapping with people. And he would work quickly. He was a very fast artist. He made these amazing paintings, but he did not work slowly like other painters did to make everything perfect. He made it all perfect, but very quickly. And the reason why he worked so fast is so that he could get paid quickly, so he could blow it all on alcohol and and prostitutes. There is more known about him through police records and trial transcripts than any other source. He was arrested numerous times for fighting, assault, carrying illegal weapons. What illegal weapons do you think those were? Yeah, swords. All right. He would walk around with a sword. And, inside the town, it was illegal to walk around with a sword. He would just walk around with a sword. Right. And it's not like, somebody carrying a pistol, they can hide it, in their pants or something, in their pocket. It was very obvious that he would be walking around with a sword. He arrested many times for drunkenness, insulting police. There was one story where a policeman was going to let him off with a warning for illegal weapons, and Caravaggio said, "You can stick it up your butt." There was a story where a tavern waiter served Caravaggio cooked artichokes, and Caravaggio asked if they were cooked in butter or oil. And the waiter could not remember how they were cooked and says, "Well, you can smell them and see." And so Caravaggio flies into a fit of rage and draws a sword on the waiter. Another story, a notary warns Caravaggio to stay away from "quote unquote" Lena. That was her name. a prostitute who was a model and lover for Caravaggio. Caravaggio flies into a rage at the notary. Later that night, the notary is walking down a dark street, and he was attacked from behind, and he never saw his attacker. Who do you think that could have been? He was sued for not paying his rent. Caravaggio and his friends would write offensive, vulgar poetry about rival artists. He was sued about that. The rival artist won, but the consequences were low. It's like he didn't have to, there wasn't much of it. It was like a slap on the wrist. But the rival artist got in the last laugh. When Caravaggio died, the rival artist is the one who wrote his biography, wrote Caravaggio's biography. So he got to say all the bad, insulting things about Caravaggio in the biography. In fact, you guys read Vasari, so you know at this time that that writing is very biased. Even like, because you think about like how art history is written today, it's written like an encyclopedia, that there's no bias one way or the other. But in these times, when people would write histories, it was very biased. He was once arrested for defacing the house of a woman who insulted him. The landlady took his possessions, and he smeared excrement on her door and sang vulgar songs in front of her house. He was once hospitalized with a sword wound, and when he was asked how it happened, he said, "I fell on my sword." All right, so that tells you a little bit about Caravaggio. So let me introduce this other character, Ranuccio Tomassoni. He was a scoundrel. He was a gangster. He was from a wealthy family. And Tomassoni and his brothers, a group of thugs, were involved in shady business dealings. I think that slide is, there's a slide is a little bit premature. All right. So they played this game called Palla-Corta. It's kind of like tennis. And when I look up pictures of Palla-Corta, I either get this game right here or this game right here. I don't know if that's the same game or not, but that looks pretty harsh. Anyways, all right, so Palla-Corta is played with this odd thing on your hand. It looks like that. All right, now in tennis, you often have disagreements where people argue with each other. And often Palla-Corta game would end and lead to arguments. And they would settle these arguments with duels, sword fights. Can you imagine a tennis fight or a tennis match ending up in a sword fight? All right, that's what's going on in Italy with Caravaggio. All right. So one time the fight led to a duel between Caravaggio and Tomassoni, and Caravaggio won. Tomassoni went into a hospital with a fatal wound on the artery on his leg. So that means that Caravaggio had stabbed him in the leg in that massive artery, and Tomassoni was bleeding out. The kind of wound that is, that it appears as if Caravaggio was trying to castrate Tomassoni. And wounds of castration or wounds of attempted castration are usually when you're fighting over a girl. If you have a facial wound, it's you're defending your honor. But if it's a wound in the groin area, you're fighting over a girl. Well, what girl could they possibly be fighting over? They are fighting over this girl right here. She is a prostitute and Caravaggio's model. Tomassoni was her pimp. That's what the fight was about. All right, so Caravaggio was found guilty and he escaped from prison. There was a warrant out for his arrest. And I don't know if you ever seen like Wanted Dead or Alive. They didn't care about the alive part. All right. So the word went out that if you see this man, you are legally bound and authorized to kill him on the spot. All right. So that is Caravaggio. All right, now, so how does Caravaggio escape being found? He's got to move around. So here is a map of all his movements around Italy trying to escape justice. So, how does he hide and evade law enforcement? So, here's Caravaggio. He's been arrested, he's been convicted, and he's been jailed, and he escaped. But he's an excellent artist. So, he will find a patron. He and the patron will strike up a deal. And so, he will paint for the patron in order to earn money. He will stay in the patron's house. He will earn money. So let's see, he'll stay with the patron, and he will paint for the patron, and the patron will protect him from law enforcement. But after a while, police start coming to the patron's house, say, "Hey, we had a fight at the bar. We think Caravaggio's involved. We know he's with you. Hand him over." And the patron's like, "No, he's not here. I don't know where he is. I don't know what you're talking about." But after a few times of the cops visiting the patron, because these patrons, I don't want to say they're good people, but they are high people in the community. They don't want all this drama getting out. And also, let me back up. Caravaggio is a very sought after artist. He paints excellent, he paints fast. And so if you can get him to paint some things for you, that raises your status, but also you got to deal with the law enforcement. All right, eventually the patrons get upset about all the police coming to their house, and so they kick out Caravaggio. And then he just goes to the next patron, and same thing happens there again, and he just goes from one patron to another, painting for them and getting kicked out. All right, that's how he works. All right, so Lynn, let's go to San Luigi in Rome, and we're going to go into this little chapel. In this chapel, there are 3 Caravaggio paintings. We're going to look at the one on the left, the Calling of St. Matthew. And this is the moment where I think as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. It was as simple as that. Most art historians recognize the guy that's pointing as Matthew. He's like pointing to himself and saying, "Who, me?" And also, I want you to notice the extreme tenebrism in this painting. And then the light coming in from the right is the symbol of the call. It's the IHS, in his service. All right, so some art historians think that Matthew is the bearded guy in the middle, and some experts disagree. So some think that he is the one that is counting money, that he is the tax collector, and it looks like, the one that's pointing, that most art historians think that's Matthew. Others say, well, he's pointing to the guy that's counting the money. So there's a little bit of disagreement amongst art historians as to exactly who is Peter in this painting, or who is Matthew. And then you can see that Peter is with Christ right there. And if we look closely behind Christ, what is that above his head? Yeah, that's the halo. That halo looks a lot different than the halos we've been seeing in art history. Usually it's like a gold disc behind them, but now it's this ring that is over his head, and it is only slightly catching the light that is coming in. We can just see just a hint of this halo. And the hand that is pointing is a lot of reminiscent to Michelangelo's Hand of God. One other thing about this painting is, if we go back to actually look at the painting, Christ is not fully revealed in this painting. He is behind Peter. And look how Peter has his back to us. That's very unusual at this time. That's different thinking. Whereas before, you would think, in the Renaissance, Christ is either on the cross or he's in the middle, or he's fully revealed. Everything revolves around him. But here, he's just like another guy. It's so natural. It almost seems like you're sitting in this dark tax collector's office, and just two guys have walked in. That there's no uh, 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 ceremony. There's no uh, uh, how do I put it, grandness about it. All right, and then we got a nice meme out of it. All right, do you guys remember the story of Judith and Holofernes? She cut off Holofernes' head. We talked about that with, I think, Michelangelo. Anyways, Judith and Holofernes is a very popular. It's a very popular story at this time. There's lots of paintings of Judith and Holofernes. Judith served her people by seducing and pleasuring Holofernes and then killing him. Like I said, there's lots of paintings of Judith and Holofernes. And the Catholic Church, this is the time of the Counter Reformation, so they're trying to make art more emotional. All right. So, and you guys remember how the artists of the Renaissance and the Baroque differ, how the Counter Reformation is making art much more exciting. And we have, they're coming out of the Stoic Renaissance and making things more dramatic. So then, how do you make this story more emotional and dynamic to draw people back to Catholicism? So when we have pictures of Judith and Holofernes, almost always it's after the act. We have the head of Holofernes with Judith. That is the way it's been up until now. In fact, and then we have a lot that are like this, Saint Judith, where there's no mention of the head. All right, so these are all quite safe, and I don't want to say boring, but compared to what we're about to see, here we have Judith and Holofernes by Caravaggio. I put this picture in to give you a sense of the size of the artwork. Are we good? Need more time? So what makes this one different? Right, the act. We're right in the middle of the act. She's cutting the head off. She's halfway through hacking that sword through his neck. You can see the blood spurting from his neck. And then another thing that makes this different is that, the tenebrism. Look at that dramatic lighting. It's like they're on a stage set where the back is very dark and there's a spotlight on just the action. And we have a close-up of the of Judith and the maidservant. Another one was just found between in 2012, and this Caravaggio was found in somebody's attic in 2012, and it sold for 100 million after it was authenticated. All right. So I haven't really much talked about women artists. They're pretty rare in these times of the Baroque and the Renaissance. Mostly women were, I don't want to say assigned, but they had very little options or very few options of their adulthood. So they could either go into the convent, become nuns, or they were destined for motherhood and staying in the home. Men decided the careers for the women, and the women that did become artists usually were the daughters of artists themselves, and so they were trained by their fathers. So that was pretty much the there was no I want to be an artist, and my dad's a shoemaker, my mom stays in the home, and I want to be an artist, and so I'll go and be an artist. There wasn't any of that. It was the dad teaching the daughter as she grew up. And usually the women painters of this time, the ones that did make art, they were pretty much only doing still life and portrait. So let me introduce you to you guys the 5 categories of painting. And the number one high, and these 5 like types of painting, or these 5 areas of painting, are hierarchical. That means that the number one section of painting, or the type of painting, is history painting, and that is the highest form of painting. That's the most challenging, that's the most difficult to do, and not everybody is even allowed to do it. Not everybody is commissioned to do historical paintings. So you have to be especially trained to do history paintings. And history paintings are, just what you might think is things that happened in history, or it could be religion or mythology. Those are the basic 3 types of things that are under history painting. Number 2 then would be portrait painting. And that's just exactly what you think it is, that the painting that you make looks exactly like the person that you are painting. That's a portrait. Then there's genre painting. I taught you guys about this. What is a genre? Do you remember? Everyday people doing what? Everyday things, all right? Then there's landscape painting. You've heard of that. And then at the bottom rung is still life painting. Is everybody done with this list? Anybody need more time? So the women artists of the Baroque era were pretty much doing portraits and still lifes. That's what they did. They didn't do history painting. Well, let me introduce you to Artemisia Gentileschi. Her father was an artist, and she wanted to be a history artist. And at this time, no other women have ever been a history artist. And her father sent her at 17 years old to train with Agostino Tassi. And she goes and studies with this guy, but something happens and she accuses him of raping her. There was a 7-month long court case, and she was tortured with thumb screws to see if she was telling the truth. And she gave very graphic testimony at this court case. So the story goes that she and the artist were in a room. He was teaching her how to paint. In the next room was her chaperone. Chaperone is, you can't ever have a woman and a man in a room together, because that doesn't look right. It's inappropriate. So women would often have a chaperone if she's going to be alone with a man, and that chaperone is another woman. The chaperone was in another room. She cried out to the chaperone to help her, and the chaperone was too scared to respond. So she fought off her attacker, stabbed him with a knife, or grabbed a knife and tried to use it on him. The the sheets were stained with blood. And she won the case at the trial, which is very rare. And the artist was found guilty, but he never served his sentence because he was friends with the Pope. Is that fair? Absolutely not. All right. It's a horrible travesty of justice. So let's go to the Uffizi Gallery and let's take a look at this painting right here of Judith slaying Holofernes by Artemisia Gentileschi. So after the trial, she was infamous. She has a very edgy personality. She is not one to be meek and mild, that she's a tough girl. And her father was very influential, and she had lots of patrons. Even the Medici commissioned artworks from her. She did a female David and Goliath. She painted, and so in this painting right here, she painted herself as Judith, and she painted Tassi as Holofernes. All right, to get revenge on him for doing that despicable deed with her. So if we look closely at some of the details in here, on her, she's wearing a bracelet that has the goddess Artemis on it. And compositionally, the sword that goes down the middle of the painting divides the painting in half. And so in her, if you find the center of the painting, you'll find that her hand is right there at the center. So the main action is her hand cutting off the head of Holofernes or Tassi. There's lots of directional lines in this picture that makes it more dynamic. And then if we can compare it to Caravaggio, look at how much more realistic hers is over Caravaggio's. The maidservant is having to hold him down as he struggles to get free. She is showing much more effort to cut off the head. Whereas in Caravaggio's, it just seems like she's just posed. It's not real. And then the blood that is gushing from the neck of Holofernes, if you look at Artemisia's, it's much more naturalistic and how it flows down the sheets of the bed. Whereas Caravaggio's is like this weird straight lines squirting out of the neck. All right, and in Artemisia's, the models are not idealized. For example, the Judith is not idealized. Where in Caravaggio's, he's made her to be like much thinner. Whereas Artemisia, as she's painting herself, she's not idealizing herself. She's painting herself as she is. In Artemisia's, the figures are bunched up. In fact, it shows a lot more space. In Caravaggio's, it reminds me of even of Egyptian art, where everybody is placed in a line that is parallel to you. Does that make sense? Whereas Artemisia's, it goes back into space. His legs go back into space. The maidservant has had to crawl over the bed towards us to hold him down. All right, there's a lot more space in hers and less space in Caravaggio's. But Caravaggio did have a huge influence on her. You can see that harsh tenebrism is definitely reminiscent of Caravaggio. Again, with Caravaggio's, we have this unrealistic squirting of the blood, but in Artemisia's, look at how the blood goes along the forms of the sheets on the bed. And with Artemisia, we have this, beginning of a feminist artist movement. This is very early feminism, where women are working together to fight male oppression. And they found another work of hers. I showed you this one before to show you that candlelight. And there are two different versions of this painting. So she did one in which the Holofernes is wearing blue, and one in which Judith is wearing blue, and one where Judith is wearing that yellow. And last spring, I think it was, or last summer, here in Houston, the one that was in blue came to Houston, and I got to see it. So that's my own photograph right there. All right. Are there any questions about Caravaggio and Artemisia? All right. Moving on. Ooh, Velasquez. Come on. We got 10 minutes. All right. Yeah, let's do ceilings first. I think we can get through the ceilings in 10 minutes. All right, so we're in part 3 of chapter 24, and let's take a look at some ceilings. Do you remember Michelangelo's ceiling? So ever since Michelangelo painted the ceiling on the Sistine Chapel, rich patrons have wanted their own name honored on ceilings. So here we have like the glorification of the ring of Urban the Eighth. And the other name for this painting that I want you to remember is Allegory of Divine Providence. But really, I want you to remember this as the Triumph of the Barberini. And as we look up at this painting, right, we see a lot of stuff. There's angels flying, there's clouds, there's architecture, there's lots of figures, and then around the edges, it looks like there's other images that are around there. And I want you to know this term right here, quadratura, quite positive that term is going to be on the test. And that is the architectural setting is fictively painted. What does fictively mean? What does this sound like? Even FICT. You ever read fiction? What does fiction mean? Yeah, fake, made up. All right. So it looks like we're looking at the sky. It looks like there's a hole in the ceiling, and we can see this architecture around there, and that there's a hole in the ceiling, and then we're looking up at the sky. All right, that's the quadratura. So Cartona moved to Rome, and there's lots of money at Rome, and there's lots of patrons that want to pay artists to make art for them. And also churches are commissioning lots of art. So the Barberini family is close to the Pope. And this painting right here is a poem. It's based on a poem of the Barberini family. And the message of this is that everybody in heaven is celebrating the Barberinis. And the ceiling celebrates the accomplishments of the Barberini family and Pope Urban VIII. All right, so if we get in even a little bit closer, there are these keys. They're given the keys to heaven, right? I really They're given the keys to heaven, and then there's this wreath of laurels. What does the wreath of laurels mean? It means victory. And then we have these bees right here, and they have this papal crown right here that they're putting the crown as well as on the Barberini wreath because one of their family members was a pope. The bees represent the Barberinis, and faith, hope, and charity hold the laurel wreaths with the bees. And I want you to know this term right here, dulceto in su, which means from below up, like a worm's eye view. So it's made to look like when you look up at the ceiling that you're actually looking at people up there flying around. And here we have divine providence instructs immortality to give eternal life to the Barberinis. We connect with the figures from below. So, and there's seats down below where you can look up at the ceiling. And then we also have Trompe l'oeil, which is fool the eye realism. The picture on the left looks like a drawing on a piece of paper on a piece of wood, and that's wrong. It's a painting. It's a picture of a painting of a drawing on a piece of paper on a piece of wood. It looks so realistic that it faked us out. We thought it was actual wood, but it's a painting of wood. And the same thing is going on in the ceiling, that we have these architectural elements that look like they are really there. It looks like a real a piece of architecture, but it's fake. All right, we're going to go to the Church of St. Ignatius, and we're going to take a look at this ceiling up here. And we have, again, this architectural elements that looks like it goes beyond the ceiling. I think it's so weird how they make it look like it's actual architecture up there, but it's a barrel vault. And here we have the whole thing right here. It's as if we're looking up at a heavenly miracle happening before us. This painting is the Catholic reassertion of the beliefs of the miraculous. It's very Baroque. It's very energetic. There's so much movement, and nothing in this painting that is static or stoic. Baroque borrows from the naturalism of Renaissance, but then activates it, makes it very active. And then we have, let's see, rays are sent from heaven and caught in a shield with Jesus' name on it. And it's used to light the flames of the divine love in a golden cauldron to be distributed by angels. On the opposite side of the vault, avenging angels threaten those who resist the light of faith with divine wrath in the forms of thunderbolts and javelins. And then on the sides, in the corners, we have the four great continents of the world. There's Asia, the Americas, Africa, and Europe. So these are all metaphors and allegories. And it's impossible to tell where the actual architecture ends and the painted architecture begins. It's an erasure of distinction between the real world and the miraculous world. And we're breaking down the barrier between our world and the next. And then we have the wings are coming towards us. That is foreshortening right there. And we're looking up at St. Ignatius being welcomed into heaven by Christ himself. And then I think our final ceiling right here, and then we'll finish for today, and I'll go through this quickly. But you can see what the ceiling looked like before. It was just a regular barrel vault. And then this is what it looks like now. So we have a barrel vault, and now it is absolutely so full of action and movement. We have the boundaries between earth and the heaven are dissolved. That you cannot tell what is earthly and what is heavenly anymore. And if we get close, we can see this ring of angels flying around. And then there are these sculpted figures attached to the ceiling. So we have painted figures and sculpted figures. Which ones are real and which ones are fake? Don't know, because it's all blended together. And then the clouds are coming out of the ceiling and covering it. So it's meant to look like there's a hole in the ceiling. We see the clouds up there, but some of the clouds are coming into the ceiling and blocking our view of parts of the ceiling. So, and it's a painted wood panel so that it's actually in front of the ceiling. Those are actual shadows. And then we have the damned right there, the damned that are getting cast out of heaven and cast into hell. And we have some foreshortening there as well. All right, that'll finish us for today. We will start with Spanish Baroque painting tomorrow. Are there any questions about anything? The presentation grades are in D2L. They will not show up on the high school side. That is a D2L only assignment. You said you would update my